Picture this. 1,000 years ago, while Europe was still trapped in rural feudalism, China had already invented paper money. They had gunpowder weapons. They had the magnetic compass. They had movable printing systems that churned out books by the thousands. The Song dynasty was a peak of human achievement. Kaifeng, the northern capital, was likely the busiest commercial hub on Earth in the 11th century. Yet, despite all that wealth and intellectual firepower, the dynasty spent its entire existence under a crushing existential threat. They bought off their enemies for peace. Then, they lost their capital to an invasion. They retreated south to reinvent themselves. But, in the end, the largest land empire in human history swallowed them whole. Today, you and I are exploring that dynasty, the Song, the most innovative Chinese empire in history. Before the Song, there was the Tang, the most powerful dynasty China had ever seen, which we looked at previously. By the mid-800s, the Tang were falling apart. Powerful regional warlords, called jiedushi military governors you should know about if you watched my Tang video, had built independent military machines that the central government could no longer control. In 875, a massive rebellion finally ignited. The dynasty never truly recovered. In 907, the last Tang emperor was deposed, and China fractured into pieces. What followed was called the Five Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period, or Wudai Shiguo. In short, it was a total mess. For 53 years, a series of short-lived dynasties rose and fell in the north of China, 5 of them in rapid succession. In the south, 10 different regional kingdoms carved up the territory. Generals were constantly betraying their own emperors. Emperors executed their own generals. One dynasty lasted less than 4 years, while another barely survived a decade. The entire era was defined by violence, betrayal, and the grinding misery of common people caught in these endless power struggles. By 959, the latest northern ruler had died young, leaving the later Zhou dynasty in a very dangerous spot. He left behind a 7-year-old heir, protected by the commander of the elite imperial guard, a man named Zhao Kuangyin. In early 960, with a child on the throne and the empire still fragile, reports arrived of a nomadic invasion from the north. Whether the threat was real or fabricated, Zhao Kuangyin was dispatched to meet them with the army. The troops marched just 1 day from the capital before making camp at Chenchao. Then, everything changed in an instant. Historians have always been skeptical of what happened next, but allegedly, his soldiers draped a yellow imperial robe over his shoulders while he slept. You have to understand, yellow was the sacred color of the emperor. When Zhao woke up, his men were kneeling, calling him their leader. He allegedly protested and tried to refuse. After some hesitation, he eventually accepted and rode back to the capital. The 7-year-old emperor's mother gracefully stepped aside to avoid a massacre. And just like that, almost bloodlessly, the legendary Song dynasty officially began. Zhao Kuangyin became Emperor Taizu. And stick with me, because what he did next is what makes him truly fascinating. Most new rulers who seize power through the military would reward their generals and keep them close by. That was the sensible move. But Taizu? He decided to do the exact opposite. A few years into his reign, he invited his most powerful military commanders to a massive banquet. They ate and drank, and once the wine was flowing, he hit them with the truth. He said something they never expected. Look, I can't sleep at night. I trust you all personally. But don't get me wrong, you are powerful men with loyal armies, and I know exactly how this game works. One day, your own soldiers are going to drape a yellow robe over your shoulders. Then we'll have another 50 years of war. He wasn't being subtle about the threat. He offered them a deal. Hand over your military commands right now. Retire to a comfortable life in the provinces. Become wealthy landowners. Marry your children into the imperial family. Give up your swords. In return, you'll live well and die in your own beds. They all accepted. This famous event became known in Chinese history as releasing military power over a cup of wine, a legendary move. It was an act of pure political genius, and this single moment set the tone for the entire dynasty. The Song dynasty would be ruled by civilians and scholars, men who passed exams rather than winning battles. That choice defined everything brilliant about the Song, and also everything that made them catastrophically vulnerable. If there is one institution that defines the Song more than any other, it's the civil service examination system. The exams themselves weren't new. They had existed in earlier dynasties, going back to the Sui and the Tang, but the Song transformed them into the primary path to political power in the largest empire on earth. Here is how it worked. Young men, and it was only men, would spend years or even decades studying the ancient Confucian classics. The 4 books, or Sishu, included the Great Learning, which was originally a chapter in the Book of Rites. It consists of a short main text attributed to Confucius and 9 commentary chapters by his disciple, a man named Chengs. Second was the Doctrine of the Mean, another chapter from the Book of Rites, attributed to Confucius's grandson, Zizhi. 3. The Analects of Confucius, a brutal compilation of speeches that could make or break a man. And 4. Mencius, high-stakes arguments between a lone scholar and the powerful kings of his age. Then, the 5 classics, the Wu Jing, which you and I briefly mentioned in our last look at history. These ancient Chinese books formed the absolute core of the traditional Confucian canon. He faced a vast ocean of philosophy and ritual. 1,000 years of debate he had to memorize perfectly. He had to compose poetry and argue moral philosophy under crushing pressure. One mistake meant failure. Then came the exams. At the lowest level, the local tests. The top scorer was called the Jun. Passing that level made you a Gongyi. The absolute best among them was crowned the High Yuan. At the peak were the imperial palace exams, held in the capital and judged by the emperor himself. The top scorer at this level was named Zhuang Yuan, but the pass rates were brutal. At the highest level, the Jinshi degree, only 1 or 2% of candidates passed each cycle. Men sat these exams for decades. Some spent their entire lives studying and never saw success. Passing changed everything. You joined the Shidafu, the elite class of scholar officials. It meant access to government power and massive social prestige. You were finally someone. Your family's status exploded alongside your own. The Song dynasty bet everything on this system. Emperor Taizu used it to build a loyal bureaucracy, answerable only to him, not to military lords. Before the Song, power belonged to a few aristocratic clans. They held a monopoly on influence. They didn't need tests. They were simply born into positions of extreme power. The Song destroyed that world, making the exam the only legitimate path to the top. In theory, even a farmer's talented son could study hard and become a high-ranking minister. But years of expensive study gave wealthy families a massive, unfair head start. Still, the principle that merit outweighed birth was a revolutionary shift in human history. This intellectual world was shaped by Neo-Confucianism, or Song Ming Li, as it is known. The original Confucius wrote about ethics and duty way back in the 5th century BCE. Neo-Confucianism took those foundations and built something far more ambitious and complex on top. It was a complete system explaining reality, the cosmos, and the moral laws of human life. The most influential figure was Zhu Zi, who lived from 1130 to 1200 CE. Zhu Xi synthesized centuries of debate into a system that eventually dominated all of East Asia. His edition of the 4 books became the mandatory text for every civil service candidate. This mindset shaped how officials viewed governance, loyalty, and what it meant to be a leader. It was sophisticated and demanding, but as you and I will see, it came with a cost. A culture valuing poetry over swords was simply not prepared for the reality of total war. And wars were coming. While building this scholarly world, the Song were also transforming their economy. They created the most commercially advanced system the medieval world had ever witnessed. Some historians prefer calling this the medieval economic revolution. Whatever name you use, the raw numbers from this period are impossible to ignore. By the 11th century, the capital had a population of nearly 1 million people. Even the most conservative estimates make it one of the largest cities on the entire planet. The city of Hangzhou reached 1.5 million people. What drove this massive explosion? It started with rice. The government imported a new variety from the Champa Kingdom in Vietnam. This rice was drought-resistant and grew in 60 days instead of the usual 150. That meant southern farmers could harvest 2 crops a year from the exact same land. Food production spiked. More food meant cities could feed more hungry mouths. More people meant more labor for manufacturing. This agricultural shift was the foundation for everything. Meanwhile, the commercial rush across the Chinese countryside was accelerating fast. Farmers stopped growing food just to survive. and started betting on the market a gamble with high-stakes consequences. Cash replaced grain. Taxes weren't about food anymore, they were about hard currency, and the rural world felt the pressure. Money saturated their society at a depth that was, at the time, completely unparalleled anywhere on Earth. By the 11th century, the Song were churning out 125,000 tons of iron every single year. This metal forged their weapons, their tools, their massive ships, and their very future. They pioneered coke-fueled furnaces, creating high-quality steel centuries before the rest of the modern world. They were industrializing in the Middle Ages, which forces us to ask a question historians still debate today. So why didn't the Song trigger their own industrial revolution? Around the year 1000, merchants in Western China started doing something strange, something potentially dangerous. Trading with heavy iron coins was a nightmare. They were too bulky to carry, making every long journey a massive risk. So, they handed their heavy coins to wealthy shops and took simple paper receipts in their place. These slips of paper represented real, physical wealth. You could buy goods with them or trade them back for iron at any given moment. This practice had technically existed since the Tang Dynasty as flying money receipts, but what happened next was a leap into the unknown. This was the birth of paper money. At first, it was just a quiet, private arrangement, but then the government stepped in. They created jiaozi, the world's very first official circulating paper currency. By the year 124, they set up an official government mint in Sichuan to issue these notes. Printing money gave the state a terrifying new power, total financial flexibility. They could fund wars and pay officials in ways no previous empire had ever even dreamed of. But there was a trap. They printed too much, sparking history's first runaway inflation. The government had to choose between stability and survival. 5 centuries before anyone else, they discovered the absolute power and the lethal danger of fiat currency. When Marco Polo arrived in the 13th century, he couldn't believe his eyes. He wrote about it in shock. He described exactly how the Great Khan's government issued it. He told of a land where paper held magic value. His readers back in Europe laughed. They thought it was all a lie. The concept was just too foreign. But China's economic energy didn't stop at the border. With the Silk Road blocked by hostile northern invaders like the Liao and the Jin, the Song turned toward the sea. They built the most advanced maritime network on Earth, connecting ports like Quanzhou to India and Africa. It was a global system. Trade offices taxed every shipment. Soon, Chinese merchants were settling in ports all across Southeast Asia and beyond. Silk, porcelain, and tea flowed out to the world. Spices and ivory came back, guided by a new invention that made the oceans a little less deadly: the compass. We will come back to that in just a moment. By the 12th century, the Song were the heart of a global trade system stretching from the China Sea to the Indian Ocean. In a very real sense, the Song dynasty was the engine of medieval globalization. Now we get to the part of Song history you likely know: their world-changing inventions. Chinese tradition calls them the 4 great inventions. They are the pillars that define China's technological legacy: papermaking, printing, gunpowder huoyao, and the compass Junanzhen. These 4 things changed the world. Not all of them were born under the Song. Paper, for instance, is far older, but the Song refined and deployed them on a massive scale. They turned ideas into world-changing tools. Woodblock printing had been around since the 7th century. It was simple, but slow. You carve a page into wood, ink it, and press. It worked for one book, but was useless for everything else. It was inefficient. But then, around the year 140, a craftsman named Bai Sheng had a brilliant idea. He baked individual Chinese characters into small pieces of clay. Each character was its own block. You could arrange them in a frame to print whatever you wanted. Print the pages, take it apart, and start the next book. It was fast, flexible, and completely revolutionary. Movable type changed everything. Gutenberg gets the credit in the West, but Bi Sheng beat him by 400 years. The real bottleneck in China was the script itself. The written language used tens of thousands of unique characters. Setting movable type for Chinese meant managing thousands of individual pieces a nightmare compared to the 26 letters of the Roman alphabet. Yet, Song printing shops were incredibly efficient. From official records to paper money, these workshops churned out documents at a scale the medieval world had never seen. It completely reshaped literacy. the cost of books, and the spread of ideas. This was a revolution. Cheap books replaced priceless manuscripts, and knowledge began to flow. But that wasn't all. Chinese alchemists had been sitting on a secret since the Tang Dynasty: gunpowder. They found it by accident while chasing immortality. Mixing saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur didn't grant eternal life, but it did create a mixture that burned fast and with terrifying violence. By the Song era, this alchemist's accident became a tool for war. We aren't talking about rifles or cannons yet, those came much later. Think fire arrows and heavy bombs hurled from massive siege engines, plus incendiary devices that could set entire enemy fleets ablaze. Eventually, they developed the fire lance, a bamboo tube spitting flames and shrapnel at close range. These were the true ancestors of every modern firearm in existence. Song China faced a constant, deadly threat from northern invaders. Gunpowder weapons weren't just a novelty, they were an essential part of their desperate military defense. Song soldiers rained gunpowder bombs down on the urchin Jin and eventually used them against the advancing Mongol hordes. Naval clashes on the Yangtze River featured fire ships and devastating incendiary weapons. Military manuals from the era even include precise recipes for different gunpowder blends, each optimized for a specific type of destruction. This technology bled westward through Mongol conquests. By the 14th century, European armies were finally getting their hands on it. By the 16th century, it had redefined war globally. Chinese scientists had actually understood the magnetic power of lodestones for hundreds of years. Back in the Tang era, people used these stones for divination and reading the landscape. Then came the major breakthrough: a magnetized iron needle floating in water, always aligned with the Earth's magnetic field. From a Chinese perspective, it consistently pointed south. This simple tool was the compass, and it changed the world. The first record of using a compass for sea navigation appears around 1088. It was hidden within one of the most incredible documents of the entire Song period, a book called the Dream Pool Essays, written by a brilliant scholar and government official named Shen. You and I need to talk about Shen. He was a diplomat, astronomer, mathematician, and perhaps the most curious person to ever live. He was a true polymath, yet I would bet 90% of you have never heard his name before today. His Dream Pool Essays are a wild collection of observations. He wrote about everything from the mystery of fossils and the mechanics of music to the very geography of the Chinese heartland. In those pages, he explains that the needle doesn't point exactly north. He even describes how sailors used it to find their way at night when the stars vanished. He was describing the very technology that would launch the age of exploration 2 centuries later. The compass traveled through Islamic trade routes and eventually landed in the hands of Europeans. By the late 12th century, European sailors were using it. The legendary voyages of Columbus, Vasco da Gama, and Magellan were only possible because of an instrument a Song official described in a book back in 1088. By medieval standards, the Song dynasty was a remarkably comfortable and livable place for its people. Its cities offered luxuries that wouldn't appear in European capitals for hundreds of years. The culture was sophisticated, literate, and surprisingly modern in its outlook. The best window you and I have into Song urban life is a single painting. It was finished between 1085 and 1145 by an artist named Zhang Zeduan. The work is titled Along the River during the Qingming festival. It is a masterpiece of historical observation. It spans 5 meters. As you unroll it from right to left, you travel from the outskirts straight into the heart of Kaifeng during the spring festival. The detail is staggering. You see camels carrying exotic goods all the way from Central Asia. There are packed restaurants and a boat nearly crashing into a bridge, while crowds on the shore panic. You see merchants, street performers, doctors, and porters. There are buildings several stories high and fire watchtowers, because Kaifeng actually had a professional fire department. It was a thriving, organized metropolis. This wasn't some symbolic or religious piece of art, like you would see in medieval Europe. It was a snapshot of the world, as it was noisy, crowded, and fully alive. That drive to document reality tells us something vital about Song culture. High society revolved around shared rituals like calligraphy, poetry, and music. Tea had been around for ages, but the Song people turned the simple act of drinking it into a high art. They whisked powdered tea into frothy, elegant drinks and served them in dark ceramic bowls. It was a complete sensory experience. This tradition eventually reached Japan and became the core of their famous tea ceremony. It all started right here. Emperor Huizong, a man we will revisit, even wrote a full book on tea. He analyzed everything from the water temperature to the perfect color of the froth. Song poetry birthed a new form called Sai lyrics. They were more personal and emotionally raw than the old classical styles of the Tang. Great poets like Li Qingjiao wrote about love, loss, and the intense experience of living through a violent century. Her work is so powerful that millions in China still memorize it today. Su Shi was another legend, a polymath, who mastered everything from poetry and painting to hydraulic engineering and government administration. His political enemies sent him into exile twice, but he wrote his most beautiful work while in banishment. He remains a beloved figure. But now, let us return to the story of Huizong. We cannot talk about Song culture without mentioning Emperor Huizong, who ruled from 1100 to 1125 as the 8th emperor of the dynasty. Huizong was one of the greatest artist emperors in human history, not just in China, but in the entire world. He forged the slender gold calligraphy style, a sharp, metallic script that artists still admire and study today. He was a brilliant painter who captured birds and flowers with haunting, scientific precision. He built the Imperial Painting Academy and gathered the greatest art collection in Chinese history. He even wrote his own books about the treasures he owned. But don't let that fool you. He was also one of the most disastrous rulers to ever live. Huizong ignored his duties and made catastrophic strategic bets. His worst mistake? Allying with the Jin against his northern neighbors. The strategy seemed clever at first, but it turned into a total disaster. In Huizong, we see the Song dynasty's deepest contradiction perfectly embodied. A refined civilization led by a man brilliant at art, yet genuinely terrible at the one thing that mattered, keeping the wolves out. From its very birth, the Song dynasty lived under a shadow of pressure from the north. Geography was the curse. The northern steppes were a vast highway for nomadic tribes to strike the Chinese heartland. The Turks, the Xiongnu, they had been shattering Chinese dynasties for 1,000 years. You and I have explored these patterns in some of my previous videos. You cannot tell the history of China without these riders. They are part of the story. The tension between settled farmers and the nomads of the steppe defined East Asian history for the Song. The immediate threat was the Liao. They were Khitans who built a powerful hybrid state, mixing nomadic skill with Chinese administration. The Liao controlled the 16 prefectures of Yanyun. This was a massive stretch of territory along the northern border, including the area around modern-day Beijing. The Song tried to retake these territories by force early on, but they failed miserably. The Liao cavalry simply crushed them. In many ways, this was the cost of the Song's own demilitarization. After a deep invasion in 1004, both sides negotiated a settlement known as the Treaty of Chanyuan. From a traditional Chinese perspective, the terms of this deal were humiliating. The Song paid a massive annual tribute, 100,000 ounces of silver and twice that in silk. Many called it an outrage. Others argued the tribute was just a small fraction of the Song's enormous tax wealth. War was expensive, peace was cheap. The pragmatists thought they had found a perfect, lasting solution. It worked for a century. The economy boomed, and the dynasty reached its absolute cultural peak. But the arrangement also hid a massive structural weakness. The world's most sophisticated civilization could no longer defend itself. To the northwest, the Tanguts also carved out a kingdom and began demanding their own tribute payments. By the early 11th century, the Song were paying off two different northern neighbors at once. This situation changed dramatically in the 12th century when a new power rose in the northeast. The Jurchen people had been Liao subjects for generations before a charismatic leader named Aguda led a revolt. They founded the Jin dynasty. In their language, Jin literally means gold. These were professional killers, organized for war and motivated by a burning revenge against their former masters. The Song saw this chaos and thought they found an opportunity. The Liao were old enemies. Why not join the Jin, crush them together, and finally reclaim those 16 prefectures? It seemed logical. Emperor Huizong went all in on the strategy. Secret deals were made. The alliance formed, the Liao were destroyed, and the land was returned. The plan appeared to work. But then, the Jurchens looked south. During the war, the Jin commanders watched the Song army fight, or rather, they watched them fail. They saw a force that was poorly led and incapable of basic military tasks. The Song weren't a military power, They were just a wealthy, sophisticated empire with no way to protect itself. In 1125, the Jin broke the alliance and invaded. What followed was the worst disaster in imperial history. The Song had no capacity to stop them. Kaifeng's defenses were real. Stone walls, armed men, but they had no idea what was coming. But the massive military infrastructure needed to stop a total invasion simply didn't exist in the form it needed to. In 1126, the Jin army besieged the capital for the very first time. There was a settlement, then a second invasion. By 1127, the city fell. We know the truth because of the Jinkang accounts, a haunting, first-hand record of the city's final hours. The Jin forces didn't just win, they devoured the city and took the imperial treasury. They took the imperial library and thousands of master craftsmen who possessed irreplaceable skills. Then they took the emperor. Huizong had abdicated in a panic, passing the throne to his son, Emperor Qinzong. It was useless. Both Huizong and Qinzong were captured by the Jin and marched north into captivity. The greatest city on earth had fallen. The artist emperor who preferred painting birds to ruling was now a prisoner who would never return. He died in a cell 9 years later. The northern Song dynasty died with him. But as the capital burned, one spark escaped. Prince Zhao fled south before the Iron Ring could close. He rallied the court, the army, and the administration. He eventually established a new capital at Hangzhou in Zhejiang province, ruling as Emperor Gaozong. What he built would become known to history as the Southern Song, a dynasty born from the ashes of defeat. But let's be honest, in 1127, the situation was absolutely dire. The Jin held everything north of the Wei River. The new government was a ghost, and enemy forces were pushing south. Survival was never guaranteed. Then, what we now call the Great Song Recovery happened. For centuries, China's economic center of gravity had been shifting south. The Yangtze River Valley and the coastal regions were fertile, commercially active, and connected to the sea. When the court retreated south, they arrived in a region that was already economically thriving. The Southern Song presided over a massive economic boom. Hangzhou became one of the world's great cities. By the 1200s, it had a population approaching 1.5 million people. Marco Polo visited decades later and called it the finest and most splendid city in the world, obsessed with its lake, canals, and gardens. Its markets and vast industries were legendary. Its sophisticated urban culture and silk trade left a deep, lasting impression on every single traveler who encountered it. The port of Guangzhou became one of the busiest commercial harbors on earth, sending Song porcelain to every corner of the Indian Ocean. Chinese merchants settled in trading communities from Java all the way to East Africa. This new empire was richer and more sophisticated than the old one had ever been. But the tragedy remained. They had lost their heartland. Every year the north stayed in enemy hands was a stinging humiliation for the people, a deep wound that demanded to be addressed. This brings us to Yue Fei. Among the military commanders who rose from the chaos, he stood apart. Born into a modest family in 1103, he wasn't destined for greatness. He was a physical powerhouse, an archer with absolute, uncomplicated loyalty to the emperor. He possessed an absolute, uncomplicated loyalty to the emperor and the dream of a unified China. Legend says his own mother even tattooed 4 characters into the skin of his back. Serve the country with utter loyalty. Whether the story is true or not, it captures who he was. He wasn't just a scholar who had reluctantly taken up a sword. He was a professional military man of exceptional ability who led his troops with a legendary discipline. There was a famous saying about his discipline: "It is easier to shake a mountain than to shake Yue Fei's army." He won battle after battle. By the 1130s, he was conducting campaigns that retook significant territory. By 1140, his forces had pushed deep into the former heartland. He truly believed he was close to recovering the north entirely and finally rescuing the surviving captured emperors from their cages. Then came the 12 gold tablets. Emperor Gaozong and his chief minister had decided on a different strategy: negotiation, not reconquest. Peace at any cost. Gaozong sent 12 gold tablets to the front 12 separate imperial orders that arrived one after another. Each one commanded Yue Fei to withdraw. Each one commanded him to stop, to turn his back on the victory he had already won. 12 orders in a single day. A death sentence wrapped in victory. Everything changed for China when Yue Fei won. He was advancing, nearly reclaiming the north. Legend says he wept when the orders arrived, writing that his life's work was being erased by dusk. He obeyed. He withdrew. But then, in 1141, he was arrested for insubordination, a lie that no one, then or now, believes. They imprisoned and interrogated him. Even his son was taken in January 1142, at just 39. Then, Yue Fei was executed. The truth of his death is still buried in shadow. Some records say he was strangled in the dark. Others claim it was poison. What we know is he died in a cell by the emperor's order, right at the moment of his greatest victory. The peace treaty with the Jin was signed that same year. The Song agreed to renounce the north, pay annual tribute, and officially call the Jin their masters. Qin Hui, the minister who plotted the execution, became the most hated man in Chinese history. To this day, statues of him and his wife still kneel in iron chains outside Yue Fei's tomb in Hangzhou. Visitors still spit on those statues. Meanwhile, Yue Fei became a legendary hero, the ultimate model of loyalty, courage, and total sacrifice. For 800 years, operas, novels, and films have retold his tragic story. While politics were defined by the trauma of the North, intellectual life was reaching a massive peak. It was the birth of one of the most significant philosophical achievements in all of history. Zhu Xi, living around 1200, pulled centuries of Neo-Confucian thought into one comprehensive system. After he died, his commentaries became the official standard for civil service exams, a status they held for over 600 years through 3 major dynasties. Zhu Xi's influence traveled far beyond China's borders. His philosophy shaped the intellectual worlds of Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. The focus on moral self-cultivation and using study as a path to growth changed the world. He perfectly merged metaphysical and ethical thought. These ideas spread across East Asia, shaping how millions of people thought about their character, their duties, and their relationship to the world around them. If the Jin were a crisis, what came next was an extinction event. By the 13th century, Genghis Khan was unstoppable. Fast, mobile, they were masters of siege warfare and brutal to any resistance. They had already destroyed the Khwarezmian Empire. They hammered the Jin and reached as far west as Poland and Hungary. In 1258, they sacked Baghdad, killed the Caliph, and ended the 500-year Islamic Golden Age. Then they turned their full attention to the Southern Song. In a grim echo of the past, the Song helped the Mongols finish the Jin in 1234. They sent their own troops north to help crush their old enemy. They actually believed the Mongols would honor the alliance and leave them in peace. They were wrong. What they didn't realize was they had just destroyed the only buffer between them and a monster. The Mongol campaigns began in the 1230s and would continue for 45 bloody years. The Song's survival for nearly 5 decades is one of the most remarkable facts in history, yet we rarely talk about it. The Mongols had already conquered everything else. The Jin fell in 6 years. Other great civilizations were overrun in mere months. But the Song held out for half a century. How? Part of the answer was the land itself. They controlled the Yangtze River basin, a maze of rivers, lakes, and rice paddies that was completely different from the open plains where Mongol cavalry ruled. Horses could not swim, cavalry could not charge across deep rivers. The Song had a massive navy, and initially, the Mongols did not. They also fought like hell. When the existential threat arrived, they produced brilliant military leaders and organized a stubborn, legendary resistance. Cities held out for years. Naval battles on the Yangtze River cost the Mongols dearly. The siege of Shenyang, lasting from 1267 to 1273, became the symbolic pivot of the war. Xiangyang was a fortress on the Han River, the key to the Song's entire inland defense. Kublai Khan surrounded it completely. The city held out for 6 incredible years. When it finally fell, it wasn't a military assault that did it, but Persian engineers with new siege machines that shattered the defenses. With Xiangyang gone, the road south lay open. The Mongol advance accelerated. Song resistance was fierce, but the line finally broke. By 1276, the capital had fallen. A child emperor, the last of his line, fleeing across the ocean with a broken court. The Mongols were right behind them. They scrambled from city to city, desperately fighting to stay one step ahead. The final collapse came on March 19, 1279, at a place called Yamen. It was a bay off the coast of modern-day Guangdong. The final Song fleet, commanded by General Zhang Shiji, consisted of nearly 1,000 ships. They were packed with soldiers, court officials, palace women, and the 8-year-old emperor, Zhao Bing. They chained their ships together to make a floating fortress. But then, the Mongol Yuan fleet struck. Absolute annihilation. Once the defeat was certain, the last prime minister, Lu Xiufu, took the 8-year-old boy in his arms. He walked to the edge of the ship and jumped straight into the sea. Zhao Bing, the final Song emperor, disappeared forever beneath the cold waters of the South China Sea. By the next morning, over 100,000 bodies were reportedly floating on the surface of the bay. Soldiers, court ladies, and servants, all gone. Just like that, 3 centuries of history vanished in the tide. The Song dynasty met its end in a southern bay in 1279. But what they built, what they invented, and what they started, none of that drowned with the boy emperor. We are talking about paper money, the compass, and early gunpowder weapons. They perfected movable type printing and built the world's first state navy. Their cities were the largest on the planet. They created a merit-based bureaucracy and a philosophical framework that lasted into the 20th century. From ceramics to calligraphy, their cultural footprint still fills our museums today. Historians estimate that by the year 1000, Song China produced 22% of global GDP. They were an economic superpower. Today, this period is remembered as the high point of Chinese civilization. It was a golden age of art and economics that no other dynasty ever quite replicated. Yet, the tragedy and the achievement are 2 sides of the same coin. The very things that made this empire so brilliant. Their preference for civilian rule and intellectual life created a massive trade empire, but it also left them wide open. They were fragile in a world where enemies could strike at any time. The Song showed us what a civilization can build. The Mongols showed us how fast it can fall. Both lessons still matter today. So here is my question for you. Why do you think the Song dynasty never industrialized? This story deserves to be heard by everyone. If this helped you see a new side of history, I am glad you were here. Thanks for watching. If you liked this, hit that like button, share it with anyone who loves a deep dive into history. And if you want more deep dives into Chinese history, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now. Click the video on your screen now to explore my next story about the Han Dynasty. I will see you there.